Good afternoon. I'm Anuj Mehrotra, Dean of the School of Business at George Washington University, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this session of George Talks Business, a weekly series of conversations with business leaders on topics of timely importance. Today, our guest is Doug Zarkin. He is the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Pearl Vision Luxottica and a GWSB alum. Doug has earned an impressive array of accolades and commendations. In fact, he was named the Marketer of the Next Generation by Brand Week and one of the 15 to watch by Youth Marketing Newsletter. Doug, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. And let me just dive into it. From the time you graduated from GWSB and now how you have carved to become one of the 15 to watch. Take us through that path. Take us through that career path, if you may.
Dean, it's very cathartic to be back on campus 20 or something years later after graduating. I think when I look back at the journey from Thurston Hall to where I am today at Pearl Vision, it definitely wasn't a straight line, but it was always about a desire to understand not just the what, but the why. And so I graduated Sunday on the Mall, and Monday morning I started graduate school at American University. I was the youngest guy in my graduate school class and graduated in 13 months from American and then went to Manhattan, where I got on the communications train at the end. So I started out in media, worked my way through account management, eventually went over to the client side when I went to Avon. Spent a couple years at Avon, went into the intimates business at Victoria's Secret, and for the last 7 years I've been at Luxottica, really reinvigorating the Pearl Vision brand. Pearl Vision, not just like GW is an iconic business, but Pearl was in a real state of revitalization. It needed to really redirect its energy to reestablishing itself as the leader in the category. And so for the last 7 years we've been on that journey.
Great, that's great. So before, Doug, we get into the topic that we really want to discuss today, which is how online retailing has been impacting the brand management. Take us back a little bit before that age of online retailing. What was the branding strategy like, and what were you up to at that time?
You know, branding was easy when there was no opportunity to get real-time feedback from consumers. You know, you would put an advertisement out or you'd run a print ad, and consumers would tell you what they thought by the results that you generated at retail. Now, if you take a misstep, you're going to know instantly. And sometimes that misstep could be devastating. I mean, case in point, what happened to Pepsi a couple years ago with the Jenner spot. Interesting idea, horrific execution, and it set the brand back, for years. Now more than ever, you need to measure twice before cutting once. Marketers and brand managers have to really be in tune with not only the needs and the wants, but the desires of their customer. And they really need to understand the truth of their brand better than ever, because consumers are unforgiving and they're going to let you know, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's reputation management. It is really challenging to miss and really easy to know if you missed.
So when did you start noticing that? When did you start noticing that online retailing and Amazons and all that are having an impact on how you're thinking about brand strategy and how you're getting this feedback?
I would say probably early 2000s. I think Amazon has done a really nice thing for brand managers. It's raised our game. Mm-hmm. It has forced companies to not just go into retail. 20, 30 years ago, anybody could open up a retail store and be successful. Amazon has not killed retail. Amazon has killed shitty retail. They have forced brands and organizations to really have a clear idea of purpose. What is your reason to believe as a retail brand? What is your four-walled retail strategy? Most importantly, what value are you delivering to a consumer? Value being experience divided by price. If you're delivering an amazing experience, price is somewhat irrelevant because the consumer is going to see a positive value equation. That's what I think Amazon has really done.
So I agree. I think you mentioned something very important for whether it is for marketing or whether it is for brand development. The consumer wants to look at what the value is to the consumer, and it goes through that whole process. So guide us through how Luxottica, which has of course so many different brands, which first of all, why are there so many different brands, and how do you end up creating a brand which is an umbrella brand, so to speak, and get this value to the consumers, and how do you market that?
So Luxottica is no different than Estee Lauder or L'Oreal in that they maintain a portfolio of brands. Mm-hmm. The reason why you maintain a portfolio of brands is because consumers need to have a variety of choices. Mm-hmm. In every portfolio there are higher end, there are more moderate end experiences. And I think for Pearl Vision in particular, what we represent is premier optical retail. If you're somebody who, like yourself, is wearing eyewear, eyewear is first and foremost a medical device, and then it's a fashion statement. And so if you believe that a medical device can be done for $39.95, or you want to buy your glasses at the same place where you buy your groceries, there's an option for that. But if you really recognize the fact that what you're wearing on your face is helping you really unlock your potential by seeing clearly, you want to go to the best. And that's why we exist at Luxottica. We exist to provide a premier optical retailing experience, because we truly understand that value equation begins with experience. We also sell the premier selection of frames and lenses. And so what we're doing in every neighborhood where we exist is connecting with our neighbors, connecting with our consumers, really becoming that neighborhood destination that people can trust with their eye care and then eventually their eyewear needs.
So that's very interesting, Doug. But there are certain products which I would buy without having to think in terms of going online.
Sure.
Like a book, right?
Okay.
Now, glasses are more personal, right? So you want to try them out. You want to be able to put them on your glasses. Now, of course, you can return things and so on and so forth. But in the early days, when you were going through online retailing, how were you giving that marketing of, how were you able to market eyeglasses, as an example, where people actually wanted to fit them first and then buy them?
So I couldn't agree with you more. Eyewear is a very personal decision, and the majority of the experiences that people have with eyewear is tactile. They want to go and they want to get fitted. They also need to meet with an eye care expert who can help fit them. In our category, a millimeter of fit can make the difference between seeing clearly and having massive headaches. And so I agree with you, the online experience is okay, but it's no different than I think what people thought about Zappos 20 years ago. People buying shoes, it used to be a very tactile experience, and look how successful Zappos is. It's really about what your need state is. Yeah. Some people believe that eyewear can be done online, and it's a very minor segment within optical retail. It's noticeable, there's been a lot of press about it. I think it's a great opportunity for a certain segment of the population to get their eyes healthy through online solutions. But the reality is, we believe at Pearl that our brand of people caring for people is what sets us apart.
Right. So with the onset of Amazon and online retailing, for example, overall, you must have faced some challenges.
Sure.
What were the biggest challenges, and how did you adapt to those? And perhaps if you could walk us through whether some of those challenges that you faced are more widely applicable to other businesses, or was it just very specific to the field that you are in?
So as I mentioned before, Amazon is not a retail killer. In fact, Amazon's reason for being in many cases is to take that small business and accelerate them. What it did for us at Pearl Vision, and I think has done for a lot of brands, is that it's really been a mirror up to our face to ask us, what do we really stand for? A retail destination is a tactile expression of your brand position. And so for Pearl Vision in particular, it forced us to go back and really revisit our raison d'etre, our reason to believe. Because marketing a brand is about its positioning, which is about its art of sacrifice. An effective position means that you're going to do some things well and you're not going to talk about other things or really focus on other things. And I think what that Amazon mentality is doing is that it's really forcing brands like ours, like many others in categories, to really evaluate what is their retail experience, one. Two, what is their product strategy? And I think most importantly, it's actually having a positive effect on investing in people. When you have an online experience, you actually need to think about what your associates can deliver as part of an organizational service offering. And so at Pearl Vision in particular, we are investing heavily in something that we call our neighborhood eye care experience, making sure that our associates are knowledgeable, that our associates realize that they're not just caring for a prescription, that they're caring for the people behind the eyes. And so that is allowing us to get a higher evaluation when it comes to experience, which is also allowing us to not have to be such a discounter in trying to convince people to buy because we're the cheapest. And we're not, and we have no intention to be.
Excellent. So there's a lot going on here, and you have obviously been adapting to various different times on how to be doing branding and how to be doing marketing.
Sure.
So tell us, what are some of the biggest changes? Take us through the evolution of marketing in, let's say, the last 20 years.
Wow. So since my intro to marketing,
yes.
My intro to marketing class sophomore year at GW to where I am today, there is this great yet powerful yet scary weapon called big data.
Yes.
Okay. You cannot be in business if you don't understand A, what is big data, and B, how to use it. For a marketer like myself, I think the biggest evolution has become a bit of a focus less on just crunching numbers and more on asking the right questions. Because data is only as good as the questions that you ask. It's a beautiful day here in DC, but if I ask you a question a certain way, I could get an answer on a research report that convinces you that it's the coldest day you've ever experienced, just by how I phrase the question. And so marketers today, I think more than ever, are having to focus back on asking the right questions in order to make the answers that come through big data more meaningful. The other evolution is really in the real-time feedback. Now more than ever, when you put something out into the digital ecosphere, you find out immediately if it's a hit or a dog. And if it's a dog, you need to be prepared to read and react. And so I think we now go into executional strategies with a backup plan in mind, not because we think we're going to fail, but sometimes as smart as we think we are, we've missed it. Right. And the consumer is going to let us know so.
Right. So there was an age-old saying that marketing is both of an art and a science. Is it becoming more of a science now with all the big data and the analysis that is required?
The two best friends that I have in my arsenal are Einstein and Picasso. You need to be both an artist and a scientist in order to effectively market. And I think the reason is very simple. Marketing is about motivating a consumer to take action. A human is not somebody that you can simply understand by the numbers that come out of a spreadsheet. The most effective way to understand about your consumer is to get out of the boardroom and go talk to them. When I was at Avon, I was an Avon lady. I sold lip gloss for the first 6 weeks of my tenure at Avon, and I could still do it. So if you have somebody in your life that needs help, I'm happy to do it. But what I learned was the frontline experience. What I understood was the dynamic between our associates and our customers. And I think that art of really active listening, getting to know your customers so that you can anticipate their needs, you can understand their wants, and you can try to figure out their desires, that requires you to be an artist. The scientist comes in terms of measuring ROI, in terms of vacillating your media in order to reach certain goals, in being statistically sound in what you're doing. But it really is very much now more than ever a challenge to be both an artist and a scientist in the world of marketing.
I mean, that ties it back to the value that you're creating in any case. So you mentioned big data, you mentioned all this, but what are some of the upcoming technologies that make you think about where the marketing world and the branding world is going?
Sure.
And perhaps the AI, how is that going to impact, and in general, and particularly for Luxottica?
So artificial intelligence, it used 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, every question was about AI. About big data. Now it's about AI. How are you using AI? The challenge there with figuring out how to use AI is that, like most things, technology can be used for good or it can be used for evil. Mm-hmm. We want to use technology as a means to strengthen the personal connection. And so I'll give you a really good idea of how we would use artificial intelligence in technology in particular. So lens simulation. Mm-hmm. When you're buying a lens for a pair of glasses, being able to understand the impact of something like a high definition lens or a transitions photochromatic lens that goes from clear to sun. Being able to talk about that is one thing, being able to show it is another. For us, I think our use of AI is going to be as an assisting tool to help direct consumers to find a solution, but not give them the solution. Because at the end of the day, the most valuable part of our brand is our people. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I would not want to see us or any brand really go away with. Because at the end of the day, we are all people, we are all searching for value, we are all looking for support, and that's not something predictive that you can do through AI.
Extremely well said, extremely well put, I must say. So, Doug, many students and many folks who are watching right now online, for example, they were asked to submit some questions. And one of the questions that came from them was, for me to ask you, what do you think are some of the best opportunities as well as challenges that you foresee in the next decade or so from the perspective of marketing and branding, with all of this backdrop of AI and big data and technologies coming in?
That sounds like a final grade question, so you'll have to let me know how I do on my answer. And the good news is I don't think there is a right answer to that. Mm-hmm. I think what you're going to see is a little bit of a revolution in terms of how brands use big data. There was a push in the last decade to get as much data as you possibly could. Now we have all these dashboards, we have all these metrics, and it becomes a culling of the herd. So I think there's going to be a resurgence into the notion of few but more meaningful. So I think companies are going to really need to start to assess what are the core KPIs and dig deep in them versus getting a data point on every single aspect of the customer journey. So that's one thing. I think the reinvention of the retail model. It's interesting. Online players like Amazon and in our category, Warby Parker, are using retail as more of a showroom, as a touch point. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see if you see brands like Zappos, for example, opening up a brick and mortar. How are online players going to recognize that if they build out a retail touch point, it actually gives them another opportunity to bring their brand to life? I think the third is recognizing that we know what we don't know. And by that, I mean, we are never going to be as smart as our consumer is, which is why we have to continue to listen in order to lead. And so I think you're going to see companies reinvest more in understanding the customer journey to really see if you can find those nuances that send a consumer either your way or to your competition. So hopefully those. How'd I do?
Very well,
Yeah?
very well,
All
I
right.
must say. And so much of this we have not really taught potentially when you were a student here. So I'm always wondering from a dean's perspective here, sitting here, what are some of the things that we should be teaching in our marketing classes, in our branding classes, in anticipation of these kind of challenges and opportunities that exist today?
Well, the first thing, you got to do away with the 8:30 a.m. start. Like, it's just horrendous. You're going to get low attendance. Even if the professor's charming, you're going to get low attendance, especially on a Friday. I think the evolution of the business school degree is predicated on taking real-world experiences from the boardroom into the classroom. I've had the opportunity to teach in a number of institutions, both domestically and internationally. And what I find is that students want to apply what they're reading in a textbook to real life situations. I think the case study method is a great step forward, but case studies are a moment in time. And so it's very hard to go back into 1992 to look at a brand, for example, to understand what the ecosystem was in 1992.
Yep.
So I think the evolution of bringing, real life situations from the boardroom into the classroom is probably one of the things that I think institutions like GW are starting to do that's going to better equip students when they're graduating with those insights to at least ask the right questions on the interviews, not necessarily have the answers.
Yeah. So that's again very well said. Let me ask you a different question. You're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yes.
And of course, in today's date, especially among the millennials, there is a huge sense of responsibility to give back. And in some sense, companies can also give back to the community, and that is also a marketing way of making an impact as well. It would be great to hear some of the things that Luxottica overall and maybe Pearl Vision is doing in terms of this giving back to the community, and if you could describe some of the things that are dear to you.
Sure. So there is a movement in society that I call conscious consumerism, where people are investing and making decisions on the decision tree with an understanding of how that brand or organization is giving back. One of the organizations that's a central part of the Luxottica family is an organization called OneSight. And OneSight's mission is really to unlock the possibilities of people who are suffering with vision issues to see clearly. 80% of what we learn is through our eyes. And especially when it comes to kids, school-age kids, 1 out of every 4 school-age children has an undiagnosed vision issue. And so brands like LensCrafters and Pearl Vision are contributing to that cause by really supporting OneSight in their mission. We also have an exciting program at Pearl Vision that we call Cornea. And it's an acronym, and it stands for Community Outreach to Reinforce Neighborhood Eye Care Activities. And really what we do is we go to churches and synagogues and students groups and Friday Night Light football games, and we'll do cleanings and screenings and adjustments as a way not only to meet our neighbors, but as I mentioned before, a millimeter of fit can make the difference between you seeing clearly and having a really bad headache. And so when we take our glasses off every day, they tend to get out of adjustment. Our eye care experts go out into the community as a way to make those connections.
Excellent, excellent. So one of the questions that I often ask folks is, especially given where we are in the school here to try and prepare our graduates, is you talked about how some of the field is changing, etc.
Sure.
Once the folks graduate, what must they do to keep up with the field as it changes? Because in lots of fields, people are looking for lifelong learning.
Sure.
So how is marketing and branding evolving and changing where that lifelong learning will become important, and what are the best ways for them to get to that point?
So I think the most valuable thing I've had in my career, I've been fortunate to have a few mentors, folks that took me under their wing early on in my career to kind of point me in the right direction. I think finding somebody to learn from is the first order of business. When you join an organization, the chances are you're not going to stay at that organization for a very long time. But what you can do in that organization is find somebody that you connect with emotionally and intellectually, and look at them as a thought leader, as sort of your Obi-Wan Kenobi to take you through the journey of learning. You know, back when I graduated, there was not the internet availability that there is today. There were not blogs, there were not online resources. If you wanted to learn something, you went to the library. Now it's almost too much. There's too many opinions. There's too much out there. I think what you do is you look at leaders that you admire what they've done professionally. You know, follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on their blog. Open yourself up to reading the Wall Street Journal, open yourself up to reading Bloomberg. You don't have to read every single number. But what you do is you gain bits of insight. You might find an author that you like their perspective on and follow them. So there is no right way. There are so many ways to do it. But the bottom line is, I think the most important thing are finding people in your career that you can create a connection with and use them to help guide you through the journey of learning.
I think that's great advice as well. So let me take you back to your undergraduate days one more time. And, you know, at least a lot of folks in my field always feel that anybody can do marketing and everybody has an idea. So there may have been certain things. What made you choose marketing, first of all, as an undergraduate? And what would be, if you were to go back, what advice would you give yourself as you look through your career and how you've been successful? Perhaps you wouldn't want to change a thing, and perhaps there are things that you would like to share with our students today in how they might look at things and what's coming their way.
So there's a great quote from a movie called Ferris Bueller, and it talks about the fact that life moves pretty fast. You know, if you don't stop and look around, it's going to pass you by. I just butchered the quote, but you guys get the point. I think for me, in my 4 years at GW, you know, I wish I had taken a step back and listened more. You know, there is such a pressure in every academic institution to perform. Undergrad really taught me the beginnings of how to think. High school is about memorizing. Okay, you know, you take your SATs and you join an organization, you join an institution. College started to teach me how to think. And I think I would have been able to take my thinking to another level had I been a better listener, to really understand, not just be able to resuscitate back in a test or a Q&A format what I was gathering. So I think the idea of active listening. I think the biggest thing that I probably would have given myself as advice is there is no right way. Stop searching for the right way. Focus on a way. Every person that comes to GW is a brand, and every brand is unique. What are the reasons to believe that an organization is going to find in you so that you can make a contribution, and focus on that?
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. So I'm going to ask you one final question,
Okay.
which will put you in a spot, because I asked that question in my previous interview, and that got the best answer. So let's see what happens this time, Doug. So what have I asked you that I should have asked? What have I not asked you today that I should have asked you, especially given the audience today of alumni and students and faculty here and staff?
You know, I think that's a really rough question. Wow, that's a really, really rough question, especially to the dean of the business school. You know, I would say, are we preparing our students to get that first job?
Yeah.
And I think there are opportunities. I had the pleasure of speaking to a class a few minutes ago here, and we talked about the fact that when you leave school, when you're hired, you're not being hired because of your ability to make a contribution. You're hired for our ability to recognize that we're making an investment in you and that eventually you're going to return on that investment. And I think shaping, especially as students get into their junior and senior year, the understanding that don't expect yourself, don't market yourself to an organization as you're going to go in and make a difference. Recognize that you're marketing yourself as somebody who's going to go in, and if you invest in me as a graduate of George Washington University, I'm going to pay that back.
Great. I think you hit it right on the mark in my mind, because I think one of the things which you earlier mentioned, which is also very important, is really that when you are adding value most is when you are able to ask the right questions. And that's critical thinking, and that is also providing yourself. You are yourself a brand for it when you are finding your first job as to what you are bringing to the plate. So thank you very much, Doug. It's been a great conversation with you. And really, we are so proud of your achievements. So this is, thank you all also for joining, who are here today as well as who are online. George Talks Business will continue actually this evening. We have a double header today, so we are fortunate. Please join us for another session at 6 p.m. At that time, Our guest will be John Miller. He is a preeminent Major League Baseball broadcaster and National Baseball Hall of Fame 2010 Fort C. Frick Award winner. John will discuss the state of baseball. Thank you all again.